When I turned 60, I thought I'd already seen every kind of heartbreak there was. The kind that comes from losing parents too soon, from raising ungrateful children, from burying a husband who promised forever but left me with silence and unpaid bills. But I was wrong. I hadn't yet experienced the kind of heartbreak that comes from being told you're too old to love, not by strangers, but by your own family. My name is Evelyn Harris. I live in a quiet town in Oregon, in a modest 2-story house that once echoed with laughter, slam doors, and the steady rhythm of a family growing up. Now it's mostly quiet, the kind of quiet that gets heavy at night, the kind of quiet that makes you remember things you'd rather forget. After my husband George passed away, I tried to fill the house with noise again. I joined a local church choir, volunteered at the food pantry, started baking too much and giving pies away to neighbors who barely knew my name. Anything to keep from hearing the creak of the hallway floorboards where George used to walk. I thought keeping busy would mean I was healing. I didn't realize I was just running. Then, one evening after choir practice, I met Daniel. He wasn't extraordinary at first glance. A man in his early 60s, with kind eyes, a little silver in his beard, and the sort of posture that said he'd worked hard all his life. But he had something that most people my age had long forgotten. Warmth. Real warmth. The kind that comes from being fully present, from listening without waiting to talk. He started bringing me coffee after practice, saying it was too much for one person, but somehow always knowing exactly how I liked mine, with a little honey instead of sugar, and cream stirred counterclockwise. We talked about everything: music, travel, the loneliness that creeps in when children stop calling. He told me he used to be a carpenter, that he'd built homes for other families, but never really had one of his own that felt stable. I told him about my late husband, about my daughter Rachel, and my son Mark, both living their busy city lives. He listened. And when he smiled at me, something inside me, something I thought had died long ago, began to stir again. It started innocently. Walks in the park, dinner at the small Italian place by the lake, sitting together at Sunday service. But soon it became something deeper, something tender and frightening at the same time. I'd wake up thinking of him, dress a little nicer for choir, and catch myself humming love songs under my breath like a schoolgirl. And when he told me he loved me, standing in the middle of my kitchen with flour on his hands from helping me bake apple pie, I felt alive again. But love at my age comes with conditions, not from God, but from your own blood. The first to find out was my daughter Rachel. She came over one Sunday afternoon, unannounced, the way she always did when she suspected something. She saw Daniel's jacket hanging on the coat rack and frowned. "Who's this?" she asked, lifting it like it was contaminated. I laughed nervously, wiping my hands on a towel. "That's Daniel's. He's a friend from choir." Rachel's lips tightened. A friend? Or something else? Something about her tone, sharp, like she was talking to a teenager sneaking around, made me feel small. I wanted to say yes, something else, because I was proud of what Daniel and I had, but the look on her face stopped me cold. "Mom," she said finally, crossing her arms, "you can't be serious." "You're 60, and?" I asked softly, but she was already shaking her head. "You don't know this man. You're vulnerable right now. People like him, they prey on women like you. He could be after your money, your house." "Rachel, stop." My voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "You're not thinking clearly. Dad's only been gone 3 years. You're lonely, I get that, but you can't just throw yourself into some relationship like a teenager. It's embarrassing." Embarrassing. That word cut deeper than she realized. When she left, I stood by the window for a long time, watching her drive away. The sun was setting, streaking the sky in pink and gold, and for a moment I thought, maybe she's right. Maybe love at 60 is foolish. But then Daniel called. His voice, calm and gentle, melted away the doubt. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked. And just like that, The world felt bearable again. It wasn't until Mark found out that everything truly unraveled. My son had always been protective, the type who checked my car tires when he visited, who made sure my insurance was paid up. When Rachel told him about Daniel, he didn't even call me first. He drove straight to my house. He arrived while Daniel and I were having dinner. I'll never forget the way Mark's face looked when he walked in. A mix of disbelief and disgust. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, slamming the door behind him. "Mark," I said, rising from the table. "Please, calm down." He ignored me, pointing at Daniel. "Who are you?" "What do you want from my mother?" Daniel, bless his heart, tried to stay calm.
"Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding."
"Don't call me sir," Mark snapped. "You think I don't see what you're doing? My mother's vulnerable, and you're here trying to take advantage of that. I've seen this story before." Daniel looked at me, hurt flashing across his eyes.
"Evelyn, maybe I should go."
"No," I said, my voice trembling. "Stay."
But Mark didn't let him. He grabbed Daniel by the arm and practically dragged him toward the door. "Get out of here before I call the cops!"
"Mark!" I screamed. "Stop it!"
He turned to me, his face red with anger. "You don't know what you're doing, Mom."
"He's using you. You're too old to be falling for this crap. Too old." There it was again, that cruel, dismissive phrase. When Daniel left that night, he didn't look back. And when the door closed, I collapsed on the kitchen floor, sobbing like a child. The next morning, I called Rachel, hoping for comfort. Instead, she said, "It's for your own good, Mom. You'll thank us later." Thank them? For breaking my heart? For making me feel like a burden instead of a woman? Weeks went by. I stopped singing in the choir. I stopped baking. I even stopped answering the phone. My children thought they'd saved me, but all they'd done was remind me of how invisible I'd become. Until one afternoon, I received a small letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a simple card, handwritten in neat cursive. "I didn't want to cause trouble, Evelyn, but I miss you. And I'll be waiting by the lake, where we first met. D***. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, holding that note against my chest. Every rational thought told me not to go. Every voice of caution, Rachel's, Mark's, even my own, whispered that it would only bring pain, but I'd already lost so much. And for once, I didn't want to live by fear. When I got to the lake, the sun was low, scattering gold across the water. Daniel stood there, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers. "You came," he said softly. "I almost didn't," I admitted. He smiled that same gentle smile. "I'm glad you did." We walked along the shoreline, talking like old friends who'd survived a storm. He told me he'd moved to a nearby town after that night, that he didn't want to make things harder for me. "But I couldn't forget you," he said. "I didn't come into your life to take anything, Evelyn. I came because you reminded me what hope felt like." That night, for the first time in months, I felt peace. But peace, I was about to learn, has a price. A week later, Rachel showed up again. This time, not with accusations, but with papers. "Mom," she said, setting a folder on my table. "We need to talk about your will." "My will?" I frowned. "Why now?" "Because," she said, eyes sharp, "I heard you've been seeing that man again. And if you're serious about him, we need to make sure everything is secure." She didn't mean my security. She meant hers. Something inside me shifted that day. The quiet ache turned into anger. Not the fiery kind, but the cold, clear kind that comes from betrayal. I realized then that my children didn't see me as their mother anymore. They saw me as an asset, a piece of property to manage, a bank account to protect. And they didn't know it yet, but they just started a war they couldn't win. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake listening to the old grandfather clock tick in the living room, each second reminding me that my life was passing. Not in the way I wanted, but in the way others demanded. I kept seeing Rachel's face, her cold smile, the way her perfectly manicured hand rested on those legal papers as if I were already gone.
They'd treated my heart like a financial liability, my love like a threat to their inheritance. But they had underestimated me. For 60 years, I had given everything to my family, my time, my health, my dreams, my loyalty. And now, for once in my life, I wanted something for myself. The next morning, I called Daniel. "I need to see you," I said. He didn't ask why. He just said, "I'll be there."
We met again by the lake. It was early, the air cool and crisp, mist rising off the water like smoke. When he saw the look in my eyes, he didn't smile this time. "What happened?" "My children," I said softly. "They want to control everything. My will, my home, my life. They think I'm too old to make my own choices." He nodded slowly, hands in his jacket pockets. "You're not." "I know," I said. And for the first time, I meant it. That day, I went to my lawyer, the same one George and I had used years ago. Mr. Whitman was old, kind, and patient. He had known me since Rachel and Mark were still in diapers. When I told him I wanted to update my will, he raised his eyebrows slightly. "Something happen, Evelyn?" I smiled tightly. "You could say that." He listened as I spoke, not just about money or property, but about control, respect, and dignity. When I was done, he sat back, his expression thoughtful. "Evelyn," he said, "what you're asking for, it's unusual, but it's fair. You've earned the right to live as you please. I'll make sure your wishes are respected." I left his office feeling lighter. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like me, not someone's mother, not someone's widow, just a woman reclaiming her life. But as I drove home, my phone began to ring. Rachel's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. When I got home, there were already messages waiting on my machine. Rachel's voice, sharp, angry, filled the room. "Mom, what did you do? I just got a call from Whitman's office. What is wrong with you? You're letting that man manipulate you." "I'm coming over," I sighed. Of course she was. By the time she arrived, Daniel was already there, fixing a leaky faucet in the kitchen. I'd asked him to stay, not to protect me, but because I refused to hide anymore. Rachel stormed in without knocking. "Mom, we need to talk." Now then, she saw Daniel. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me." He wiped his hands and stood, calm as ever.
"Hello, Rachel."
"Don't hello me," she snapped. "You have no right to be here." "I'm here because your mother asked me to be," he said evenly. Her eyes flicked to me. "Is that true?" "Yes," I said simply. Rachel laughed bitterly. "You've lost your mind." Something inside me, a quiet, patient part that had endured years of her condescension, finally broke. "No, Rachel," I said, my voice low but steady. "For the first time, I haven't." She blinked, startled. "I've spent my whole life living for other people. Your father, you, Mark. I've done everything right. I kept this house, raised you both, cooked, cleaned, saved, sacrificed. And now that I've finally found someone who makes me happy, you treat me like I'm insane. Like I'm a child who needs permission to live." Rachel opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. "You're angry because you can't control me anymore. Because I'm not the fragile little woman you think I am. But I am 60, Rachel, not dead." The silence that followed was so thick it felt like the air itself had weight. Rachel's expression softened for a second. Confusion, maybe even guilt. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "He's going to ruin you," she said finally. "And when he does, don't say we didn't warn you." Then she left. Daniel turned to me slowly. "You okay?" I nodded, though my eyes were burning. "Yeah, I think so." He put a hand on my shoulder. "You were incredible." I smiled faintly. I just told the truth. But I didn't realize then that the truth, especially in families, has consequences. A few days later, I received an envelope from the county courthouse. My heart nearly stopped when I opened it. It was a petition for guardianship. My own children were trying to have me declared mentally unfit to manage my affairs. I felt sick,
My hands trembled as I read the words again and again. They wanted control of my assets, my property, my life. I called Mark immediately. "What is this?" I demanded. He sighed. "Mom, we're just trying to protect you. Rachel and I are worried. That man." "Don't you dare," I snapped. "Don't you dare pretend this is about protection. This is about greed and control. You want to keep me caged so you can feel powerful. But I'm done being your dependent." "Mom." "No," I said, my voice shaking. "You listen to me, Mark. I brought you into this world. I sacrificed for you, and now you're trying to strip me of my dignity because you're scared I might love again? Shame on you." I hung up before he could answer. That night, I cried harder than I had in years. Not because of the petition. I knew I'd fight it. But because I finally saw my children for who they really were. They didn't see me as a woman. They saw me as an aging inconvenience. But Daniel wouldn't let me crumble. When he came over the next morning, he brought breakfast and flowers. "We'll get through this," he said simply. And we did. With the help of my lawyer, I gathered every document, every witness, every proof of my sound mind. The hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. Rachel and Mark both showed up, dressed in somber black, as if attending a funeral. My funeral, perhaps. I sat across from them, hands folded in my lap, calm but trembling inside. The judge, a stern woman in her 70s, glanced at me. "Mrs. Harris, do you understand why you're here today?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "My children believe I'm incapable of making my own decisions." "And do you believe that's true?" I looked straight at Rachel, then at Mark. "No, ma'am. I believe they just can't stand that I made one without them." There was a pause. Even the judge smiled faintly. When it was over, the court ruled in my favor. The petition was denied. Outside the courthouse, Rachel refused to meet my eyes. Mark muttered something about just trying to help, but I didn't respond. I walked out into the sunlight, Daniel waiting at the bottom of the steps with open arms. For the first time in years, I felt free. The months that followed were peaceful. We spent our days gardening, traveling, laughing. I didn't hear much from my children, just the occasional check-in call that felt more like obligation than affection. But I didn't mind. I had found something rare, joy that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Until, one night, I received a call from the hospital. It was Rachel. She'd been in an accident. I remember driving there in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. When I walked into her room, she looked small, fragile, almost like the little girl I used to tuck into bed. "Mom," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry." I sat beside her, took her hand. "For what, sweetheart?" "For everything, for how I treated you. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't know how to let you go." My heart ached. "You never lost me, Rachel. You just stopped seeing me." She cried quietly, and for the first time in years we held each other. Not as mother and daughter, not as enemies, but as two women who had hurt each other and survived. After she recovered, things changed. She began visiting again, not out of duty, but love. Mark softened too, though he still carried pride like a shield. It wasn't perfect, but it was healing. And through it all, Daniel stayed. He never demanded, never asked for anything but time. Time to love, time to laugh, time to live. I sometimes think about how close I came to letting fear and shame steal my last chance at happiness. How many women my age give up because the world tells them they should? But I didn't. And that, to me, is the quietest kind of revenge. Spring arrived that year with a softness I hadn't felt in decades. The air smelled like renewal. Lilacs, rain on soil, hope. Daniel and I had settled into a simple, steady rhythm. Morning coffee on the porch, tending to our small garden, walks to the farmer's market. It was the kind of life I'd always dreamed of, but never thought I deserved. But peace is fragile, especially when it's built atop the ruins of old wounds. One Sunday morning, as I was trimming roses, I saw Mark's car pull into the driveway. I hadn't seen him in months. He stepped out, dressed sharply as always, his expression unreadable. Daniel, who was sanding an old chair by the porch, greeted him politely, but Mark ignored him. "Mom," he said, adjusting his tie as if the act gave him authority. "We need to talk. Alone." I wiped my hands on my gardening apron. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of Daniel." He hesitated, then sighed heavily. "Fine. I just came to tell you. Dad's company, it's gone under. Some bad investments. Rachel and I are in a tough spot." My heart sank. "I'm sorry to hear that." He looked up, jaw tight. "We might have to sell our house." I nodded slowly. "You'll get through it." "You're smart, Mark," but I could see it in his eyes, that flicker of calculation. "I was hoping," he continued carefully, "that maybe you could help. Just until things stabilize. You've got the savings from Dad's insurance and whatever's left of the house equity. It would mean a lot." Behind him, Daniel froze. I stayed silent for a moment, the air between us growing dense. "Mark," I said quietly, "when I needed support, you tried to take everything from me. You filed a petition to declare me incompetent. Now you stand here asking for money?" He flinched, but didn't back down. "That was different, Mom. We were worried about you." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "You were worried about control," he exhaled sharply. "You're being unfair. Rachel's been sick, I'm drowning in debt, and you're out here playing house with a man you barely know." Daniel's voice, calm but firm, cut in. "Watch your tone." Mark glared at him. "Stay out of this. You don't belong here." "Maybe I don't," Daniel said softly. "But I love your mother. And I've done more to care for her than either of you have in years." The silence that followed was brutal. Mark shook his head, disgusted. "You've really lost it, Mom." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "Don't come crying to us when he takes you for everything." And then he was gone. I felt Daniel's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. "You okay?" I nodded slowly. "I think I finally am." Still, his words lingered. "It's funny. Even when your children are wrong, their voices can still pierce the deepest part of you. I'd spent my life wanting their approval, and even now, part of me craved it." That night, as we sat by the fire, Daniel took my hand. "You don't owe them anything, Evelyn. Not your money, not your peace." "I know," I whispered. "But it's hard to unlearn being needed." He smiled, faintly. "Maybe it's time to let them learn what it feels like to need you." His words settled in my heart like seeds. Over the next few weeks, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I took control of my own legacy. I went back to Mr. Whitman's office and updated my will again, but this time I added something special. Instead of leaving my estate directly to my children, I created a foundation in my name, the Harris Fund for Women Over 60. Its purpose? To help older women start over after loss, divorce, or abandonment. To remind them that it's never too late to rebuild. The remainder of my assets, my savings, my jewelry, the house, would only go to Rachel and Mark if they volunteered with the foundation at least 20 hours a month for a full year. It wasn't revenge. It was a lesson. When I told Daniel, he laughed softly, pride shining in his eyes. "That's brilliant," he said. "You're giving them a chance to understand what love really means." "Or at least to earn it," I said. Summer came fast. The days grew long, golden, lazy. Daniel and I spent one warm evening dancing on the porch to an old Sinatra record. The same song we'd first danced to at a church picnic. "The Way You Look Tonight." It should have been perfect. But fate, I've learned, has a cruel sense of timing. A few weeks later, Daniel began coughing, a deep, rasping cough that wouldn't stop. He brushed it off, called it allergies, but when the fever hit, I drove him to the hospital. The test came back 2 days later. Stage 4 lung cancer. The doctor's voice faded in and out as I sat there, holding Daniel's hand. I don't smoke, he said weakly, as if that would change the outcome. I didn't cry. Not at first. I'd cried too much in my life. I just sat there, feeling time collapse around me. For months, I became his caretaker, the role I'd perfected over a lifetime. I cooked, cleaned, bathed him, read to him. And through it all, he kept smiling, even when the pain was unbearable. "Evelyn," he whispered one night, his voice barely audible. "Promise me something, anything. When I'm gone, don't let them break you again. You have too much light left to give." I pressed my forehead against his and whispered, "You're not going anywhere." But he did. He passed away in his sleep on a quiet October morning. The sunlight was just starting to stream through the curtains, touching his face like a final kiss. I sat there for hours, holding his hand long after it had gone cold. When the funeral came, my children showed up, not out of love, but out of guilt. Rachel cried quietly. Mark stayed silent, his eyes downcast. After the service, Rachel approached me. "Mom, I'm so sorry." I looked at her, really looked at her. The fine lines around their eyes, the exhaustion in her face. She wasn't the enemy anymore. She was just lost. "I know you are," I said softly, "but I need you to understand something. Love isn't a sin, Rachel. Not at 20, not at 60. It's a gift, and if you ever find it again, don't let anyone tell you it's too late." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. It took months to rebuild life after Daniel. Some mornings I still reach for him before remembering he's gone. But grief has a way of teaching gratitude. It makes every breath, every sunrise, sacred. One afternoon, as I was tending to the garden, Rachel arrived unexpectedly, carrying a small bouquet of sunflowers. "I thought you could use these," she said shyly. I smiled. "You remembered my favorite," she nodded. "And I wanted to tell you something." Mark and I went to the foundation. We've been helping with some of the women there. It's changed the way I see things. I felt tears sting my eyes. That's all I ever wanted. We hugged for a long time. In that moment, I realized something profound. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, found in peace and forgiveness, and proving the world wrong simply by surviving with grace. I lost a husband, found love again, lost it once more. I lost my children, then found them too. But most importantly, I found myself. And that, after everything, was the truest victory. The next time someone asks me why I dared to fall in love at 60, I'll tell them this: because I finally learned that love has no expiration date. Because I was tired of being everyone's caretaker but my own. Because even in my 60s, I still deserved a heart that beats for more than survival. And if that makes me foolish, then I'll be foolish proudly. Because the alternative is a life half lived. So to every woman who's been told she's too old to start again, don't you believe them. The only thing too late is the moment you stop trying. Autumn came again, the first one without Daniel. The trees outside my window burned gold and crimson, shedding their leaves like memories. I spent my mornings drinking coffee alone, watching the steam curl upward into the cold air, thinking of all the years I'd wasted waiting for permission to be happy. It's strange how quiet houses can have voices. I swear sometimes I still heard Daniel humming from the kitchen, or the sound of his boots on the porch. But then I'd blink, and it would just be me. The ticking clock, the faint creak of floorboards, and the soft rustle of leaves brushing against the window pane. Grief, I've learned, doesn't leave. It just changes its shape. Some days it's a dull ache. Other days it's a shadow that sits beside you while you eat breakfast. But with time, it becomes something gentler, like a scar you can touch without flinching. A few months after his passing, I received a small brown envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name written in his familiar handwriting.
My heart stopped. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper.
My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, I've probably gone ahead. But don't cry for me. Loving you was the best thing I ever did. You reminded me that second chances are real, that even at our age, we can still wake up with wonder. Don't let the world make you small again. Keep singing. Keep baking those terrible pies. Keep being the woman who makes everyone around her believe that love can happen twice. Yours always, Daniel.
I pressed the letter to my chest and cried for the first time in months. Not from despair, but from gratitude. That night, I lit a candle by the window and whispered a prayer for him. I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt guided. As winter crept in, life found its rhythm again. Rachel began visiting every weekend. Sometimes she'd bring groceries, sometimes just herself and a bottle of wine. We'd sit by the fire, talking for hours, not as mother and daughter, but as two women finally seeing each other clearly. Mark, too, came around eventually. He brought his little boy, Tommy, a bright-eyed 6-year-old who loved running through my garden, pretending the rose bushes were castles. One afternoon, while they were leaving, Mark paused at the door. "Mom," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." I looked at him, surprised. For what? For not understanding. For thinking love was something with an expiration date. You and Daniel, you showed me what real love looks like. I smiled faintly. It's never too late to learn, Mark. He nodded, eyes glistening. You were right. About everything. After they left, I sat in silence for a long time. My heart felt lighter than it had in years. You see, I used to think revenge meant making them suffer. That the only way to heal was to watch the people who hurt me realize their mistakes. But I've learned that real revenge is peace. It's waking up and not needing their approval anymore. It's smiling when you think of what they took from you, because in the end, you rebuilt it yourself. I didn't just rebuild. I transformed. The foundation took off faster than I could have imagined. Women from all over the state started writing to me. Widows, divorcees, grandmothers, all with the same ache, the same fear of starting over. We hosted small workshops, taught skills, helped them find jobs, and sometimes just sat together in silence, listening to each other breathe. One woman, Clara, came to me one afternoon after a session. She was 72 and had just left a marriage that had suffocated her for 50 years. "You gave me courage," she said. "You made me believe I could live again." I smiled through tears. "You did that yourself, Clara. I just reminded you that you could." Every time a new woman walked through our doors, I saw a version of myself, lost, timid, apologetic. And every time they left stronger, I felt Daniel's spirit in the room smiling. Years passed quietly after that. The house grew older, and so did I. But there was joy in the aging. The walls no longer felt empty. They carried echoes of laughter, stories, and healing. One summer morning, Rachel surprised me with a small ceremony in the backyard. My garden, once wild and lonely, was now alive with life. Yellow roses, purple tulips, and daisies that caught the sunlight just right. She stood in front of a wooden podium and said, "Today we're dedicating this garden to someone who taught us that love, at any age, is not just possible, it's necessary." I felt my throat tighten as she revealed a small brass plaque placed beneath the largest rose bush. It read, "The Garden of Second Chances, in honor of Evelyn and Daniel." I couldn't stop the tears. Rachel hugged me tightly. "You showed me what strength looks like, Mom. And what forgiveness really means." Forgiveness. That word felt heavier than any I'd known, because it didn't come easily. It took years to unlearn the bitterness. But when I finally forgave my children, I realized it wasn't for them. It was for me. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone under the twinkling garden lights. The sky was clear,
stars scattered like tiny promises. I looked up and whispered, "I did it, Daniel. I really did it." And for a moment, just a fleeting moment, I swore I felt the air shift, like a familiar hand brushing against my cheek. Now at 72, I live in peace. My children visit often, not out of duty but love. The foundation continues to grow. We've helped hundreds of women rebuild their lives. Some have remarried. Others have found purpose in independence. Each one carries a spark of the lesson I learned the hard way. Sometimes, when people ask about my story, I tell them this. They forbade me from falling in love at 60, but none of them wanted to take care of me. They told me love was foolish, that happiness was something for the young. But the truth is, it's the older heart that knows how to love best, because we've seen what it costs. We've learned the value of quiet mornings, gentle words, and hands that stay. I found love when no one thought I should, and in doing so, I found life again. So if you're watching this and you feel like time has passed you by, it hasn't. If your heart still beats, it still deserves to be filled. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Love yourself first. Then love again, if life allows it. And when you do, love without fear, because there's nothing more beautiful than a woman who refuses to fade quietly. If my story touched your heart, please remember, share it, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories like this. Because somewhere out there, another woman needs to hear that her story isn't over yet.